All right. Scholar, which is fourth logic, or 4L. I'm afraid that the reader has previously, wittingly or unwittingly, formed the impression of the fourth logic as a function that is obviously mentally helpless and backward. Therefore, I would like to emphasize once again that this is not true at all. The essence of the problems of the fourth logic lies not in the low quality of its functioning, but in the fact that the individual assigns logic the last place in his internal hierarchy of values. Let's read these lines. It was not difficult for me to wean myself from feasts where an idle mind shines while the heart slumbers. Who is the author of these lines where the preference for emotion, the heart, over logic, the mind, is unambiguously expressed? The author is a very clever person and unsurpassed, according to the testimony of his contemporaries, polemicist, Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin, who indeed combined the first emotion with the fourth logic, which is clearly reflected in the above lines. Using the example of Pushkin, it is easy to see one of the specific features of the fourth logic, a combination of high quality work of the logical apparatus with complete madness. Pushkin is a brilliant polemicist. He lost at cards to everyone who knew how to hold them in their hands. There is nothing paradoxical here. His polemical gift was revealed in the serene atmosphere of a friendly circle, whereas a large card game in itself led to discomfort, a tense situation, in which, according to the laws of the fourth functions, Pushkin's fourth logic was turned off, and all internal energy was concentrated in emotion, the function that comes first in his internal hierarchy. And the result of playing cards based on emotions, I think, is easy to predict in advance. And so, depending on the situation, any school student lives a smart person and a fool rolled into one. So yeah, he calls fourth logic. He nicknames it. The top says scholar, but then later it's also student. And personally, I kind of like I like when the fourth position nicknames are kind of goofy in a way because it fits with the unbothered, unconcerned nature of the fourth functions. So I prefer to call 4L schoolboy because yeah, 4L they're very like schoolboyish, not being super interested in the subject matter, but they do have the potential to soak up the information, and maybe one day they'll be a good student. That's kind of the feeling one gets with 4L. A potentially a smart person and a fool rolled into one. The Russian Tsar Nicholas II was also not denied intelligence by people who knew him well, but oh man, Pobedon- Pobedonostev, Pobedonostev considered him intolerant of general questions, capable of assessing the significance of a fact only in isolation, without relation to the rest, without connection with the totality of other facts, events, trends, phenomena. The king himself said that he suffers greatly choosing what he needs from everything he hears, that he has a hard time straining his mind, and he thinks that this effort of the mind, if only it could pass into a horse when he sits on it, then that would have greatly alarmed her. Okay, not sure about that one. Everything is just like that. Fourth logic has difficulty in independent mental work. In general, in turning on the intellect without an immediate and obvious need. Yep. The brain of a student is pragmatic, does not like to look forward and in breadth, and quickly becomes moldy without pushes from the outside. So yeah, it becomes, you know, the fourth position always is kind of like a back room that nobody really opens the door very often, and so you look into it and it's like, filled with cobwebs and mold. So, and so in appearance, the fourth logic is almost no different from the second. She is also intellectually nonpartisan, easily assimilates, accepts, reproduces, develops any views, dogmatic, dialectical, skeptical. The fourth logic is also free and fearless in its premises and conclusions, like the second. And let us give it its due. Omnivorousness, combined with fearlessness, is the main and very significant trump card in the hands of the student. So, in other words, the fourth position, like the second position, is others positive. Okay. Two things allow you to quickly distinguish the fourth logic from the second. Firstly, the ideology of the student is completely divorced from his life, and he is in no way inclined to follow what he himself postulates. Tolstoy wrote about one of these owners of the fourth logic. Sviatoslav, not, oh man, these are all so tough. Sviatoslav was one of those people, always amazing for Levin, whose reasoning, very consistent, almost although never independent, goes on its own, and life extremely definite and firm in its own direction, goes on its own, completely independently, almost always contrary to reasoning. So, in other words, for L's, what's like notable about them is that they might have they might inherit ideas from others, they might have an ideology, but it seems like their life and the way they live it really doesn't follow their ideology at all. Now, that would be very different from 1Ls who are rule bound, remember. And being rule bound, they are always trying to keep their life, consistent with their beliefs, with the rules that they're following, whether loose rules, or, vaguely defined, but usually like sharply defined rules. So the second sign of the fourth logic is innate skepticism. However, let us not confuse it with the active skepticism of the third logic. The schoolboy skepticism is toothless. Pasternak's remark that engaging in intellectual activity all your life is like eating mustard all your life. This is the edge that the schoolboy rarely crosses in his criticism of rationalism. So he 4Ls kind of have an unserious skepticism of logic. It's not it's not a involved skepticism. It's just kind of like a flippant skepticism. Skepticism of the fourth logic is not an energetic denial of the effectiveness of the intellectual principle in man, but simple indifference to it. And this is the big difference between the skepticism of the third and the skepticism of the fourth logic. Because the indifference of the fourth logic, recently colored by skepticism, tomorrow may be colored by dogma, and the day after tomorrow by something else. Due to indifference to intellectual issues, the fourth logic is easily captured, but anyone who thinks that he has captured it forever will be mistaken. No, until the next interlocutor. I have no religious or philosophical worldview. I change it monthly. In a word, the student is energetic only out of necessity, idly curious, internally completely uninhibited, an intellectual chameleon, and here are all its pros and cons. To console the scholar, it is necessary to add that he is a champion. Among the population of the earth, he outnumbers all other logics. There is neither a country nor a nation where logic, which is higher than the school logic, would dominate. Purely hypothetically speaking, we can assume that in Greece in the BCs and in Germany in the 13th through 19th centuries, during the heyday of their philosophies and sciences, the fourth logic was slightly displaced. But in other times and in other spaces, the dominance of the fourth logic was and is undivided. So in other words, like 4Ls are like super populous. They outnumber the other logical types, so they kind of win. And it's kind of funny because this argument is kind of a very 4L argument because it's kind of like flippant and just like, wow, well, that's cool that you're smart and all, but we just outnumber you, so whatever, man. That seems like very like 4L logic. So that's it for the sections on logic, and now we're going to move on to physics, and I'll save that for the next video.